In the darkest corners of the galaxy, where even starlight fears to venture, there exists a creature so terrifying that entire civilizations have crumbled at the mere whisper of its name. The HFY, a nightmare given flesh, a hunter without equal, a predator that has stalked the cosmos for millennia, leaving nothing but extinction in its wake. For 10,000 years, the Galactic Council has kept this abomination locked away in the most secure prison ever conceived, buried in the dead space between galaxies where no soul should ever venture. The facility was designed by the greatest minds of 17 species, powered by the cores of dying stars, and guarded by technology that bends reality itself. But prisons, no matter how perfect, were never meant to hold gods of destruction forever. When the containment protocols failed and alarms screamed across half the galaxy, when the most feared predator in existence broke free from its cosmic tomb, the Council's emergency meeting lasted mere minutes. Their message to every inhabited world was simple: evacuate or die. Yet in a small research station on the galaxy's rim, Dr. Sarah Chen, a human xenobiologist who had never even heard of the HFY until today, received the galaxy-wide evacuation order and did something that would echo through the stars for generations to come. She laughed, not a nervous giggle or the hysteria of fear, but a genuine amused chuckle as she looked up from her datapad and called out to the shadows of her laboratory, "Well, girl, looks like we finally have some company." The responding purr from the darkness would have frozen the blood of any council member. But Sarah Chen just smiled and reached for the treat dispenser, because some pets require a very different kind of care. What the galaxy doesn't know, what they couldn't possibly understand, is that humans have their own definition of predator, and sometimes the most dangerous hunter is the one wearing a lab coat and calling the universe's apex killer by a pet name. The HFY broke free to reclaim its throne as the galaxy's deadliest predator. It's about to discover it was never even close. The Helix research station hung in space like a forgotten prayer, its lights dim against the vast emptiness between star systems. Dr. Sarah Chen had grown accustomed to the solitude over the past 3 years. The station orbited a dead world on the galaxy's outer rim, far from the bustling trade routes and political centers that defined galactic civilization. It was exactly where she wanted to be, alone with her work, her thoughts, and her very special research subject. The emergency klaxon shattered the peaceful quiet at 0347 station time. Sarah bolted upright in her bunk, her heart racing as red warning lights bathed her quarters in an ominous glow. She'd never heard the deep space emergency signal before, not in her 15 years of deep space research. The sound meant only one thing: galaxy-wide catastrophic event. She stumbled to her workstation, pulling on her lab coat as the communications array crackled to life. The message that followed would have sent most researchers fleeing to the nearest evacuation pod. Attention all stations, vessels, and inhabited worlds. This is an Alpha-level emergency broadcast from the Galactic Council High Command. Containment Protocol Omega has failed. The HFY entity designated as Specimen 0 has breached primary containment at the Void Gate facility. All personnel within a 50,000 light-year radius are ordered to evacuate immediately. Repeat, the HFY has escaped. This is not a drill. The message continued with technical specifications, evacuation routes, and increasingly desperate warnings about the approaching threat. Sarah listened with growing amusement as the council's spokesperson described the creature that had apparently broken free from the galaxy's most secure prison. According to the broadcast, the HFY stood nearly 20 feet tall, possessed adaptive camouflage capabilities, could phase through solid matter at will, regenerated from virtually any wound, and had never been defeated in combat by any known species. The creature's killing method was particularly disturbing. It would hunt its prey for days or weeks, studying their weaknesses and fears before striking. The HFY didn't just kill, it terrorized entire populations into madness before administering death with surgical precision. Whole civilizations had fallen to a single HFY, their colonies found empty except for intricate sculptures made from the bones of the former inhabitants. Fascinating, Sarah murmured, taking notes on her datapad. though the description seems a bit exaggerated. She walked to the main laboratory, her footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. The Helix station had been designed to house a crew of 50, but Sarah had requested and received permission to operate it alone. The official reason was budget constraints. Maintaining a full research crew on the galactic rim was expensive and inefficient. The unofficial reason was that Sarah's research required absolute secrecy and very specialized containment protocols. The laboratory took up nearly half the station's habitable space. Banks of computers lined the walls, their screens displaying endless streams of data about xenobiology, predator behavior, and adaptive evolution. But the real focus of the lab was the large transparent enclosure that dominated the center of the room. At first glance, the enclosure appeared empty except for a few artificial trees, some complex geological formations, and what looked like a small pond. The lighting was kept deliberately dim, mimicking the twilight conditions of a dozen different worlds. Temperature and humidity controls maintained a carefully calibrated environment that could shift between various planetary conditions within minutes. Sarah approached the enclosure and tapped gently on the transparent aluminum surface. "Morning, Luna. We've got some interesting news today." A low, rumbling purr emerged from the shadows near the artificial caves. Most people would have heard that sound and felt their primitive brains screaming warnings about apex predators and immediate death. Sarah heard it and smiled. "I know, girl. You're hungry. But first, let me tell you about this amusing development." She pulled up the emergency broadcast on the lab's main screen and began reading the Vexay's description aloud. The purring stopped abruptly, replaced by a sound that was somehow even more unsettling. Soft, whispering laughter. "Height of 20 feet, Sarah read. You're what, 18 at full extension? Though I suppose those extrasensory appendages might add a bit." She made a note on her datapad. "Adaptive camouflage? Well, that's certainly accurate. Phasing through solid matter only when you really concentrate, and it gives you a headache afterwards." Another note. "Regeneration from wounds, yes, though it takes you several days to fully recover from anything serious." The laughter grew louder, though it still carried an undertone of predatory menace that would have sent most sentients fleeing in terror. "Oh, and this part is particularly amusing," Sarah continued. "It says here that the Vex Eye has never been defeated in combat. Now, we both know that's not entirely accurate, don't we, Luna?" A massive shape shifted in the shadows of the enclosure. For just a moment, Sarah could make out the outline of something that definitely belonged in nightmares. All gated limbs that ended in razor-sharp talons, a serpentine neck that supported a head filled with far too many teeth, and eyes that seemed to hold the cold intelligence of the void itself. Then the shape dissolved back into darkness, leaving only the impression of vast coiled power waiting to be unleashed. "The best part," Sarah said, pulling up a chair next to the enclosure, "is that they think there's only one of you, one lonely Vex Ahai that escaped from their fancy prison. They have no idea that there's a whole subspecies of your kind, do they?" The creature she called Luna emerged partially from the shadows, revealing a form that was both beautiful and terrifying. Where the emergency broadcast described a monster, Sarah saw elegant efficiency. Every aspect of Luna's biology was perfectly adapted for hunting. Her camouflage wasn't just optical. It bent electromagnetic radiation, dampened sound waves, and even masked scent trails. Her skeletal structure could shift and flow like liquid while maintaining incredible strength. Most impressive of all was her intelligence. Luna wasn't just a predator. She was a problem solver, a strategist, and something approaching an artist in her approach to the hunt. "I've been thinking about our little secret," Sarah said, settling into her chair. 3 years we've been working together, and you've taught me so much about predator psychology. Did you know that your species' hunting patterns actually follow mathematical principles? Fibonacci sequences appear in your territory marking. Your hunting cycles align with prime numbers. It's absolutely beautiful work. Luna moved closer to the transparent wall, her massive form now clearly visible. She stood nearly 18 feet tall at full extension, her body covered in what looked like living shadow that rippled and flowed with each movement. Her 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on her elongated skull fixed on Sarah with the kind of attention that prey animals experienced in their final moments. The galaxy is in a panic because they think a single HFY is loose, Sarah continued. But they don't understand that your kind doesn't work alone, do they? They captured one of you 10,000 years ago, studied it, tortured it, and thought they understood what they were dealing with. But that was just the scout, wasn't it? The one sent ahead to test the galaxy's defenses. Luna's response was a complex harmonization of sounds, part growl, part purr, part something that resembled singing. Sarah had learned to interpret these vocalizations over the years. This particular combination meant amusement tinged with anticipation. Yes, I thought so. And now the scout has broken free and is probably sending signals to the rest of the pack. How many of you are there, Luna? How many HFY are waiting in the dark between galaxies for the signal that it's time to hunt? The creature's 4 eyes shifted to display patterns of bioluminescence. Sarah pulled out her translation device, though she'd learned to understand much of Luna's visual language without technological assistance. The pattern spelled out a concept that roughly translated to sufficient numbers. Sufficient for what? Taking over the galaxy? Feeding time? Sarah laughed and shook her head. You know what the really funny part is? The Council thinks they're dealing with mindless predators, monsters that kill for the sake of killing. They have no idea that your species has a complex social structure, advanced problem-solving capabilities, and what might even be called a moral code. She stood and walked to the food preparation area, pulling out what looked like a large chunk of synthetic protein. They definitely don't know that HFY can be domesticated under the right circumstances. Luna's eyes followed the food with obvious interest, but Sarah could see the creature was still listening to every word. When I first found you on that dead world 3 years ago, you were just a juvenile separated from your pack, probably left behind when the adults moved on to new hunting grounds. You were starving, injured, and alone. The smart thing would have been to call in the Council authorities and let them deal with another HFY sighting. She entered the feeding chamber through a secondary airlock carrying the protein chunk and her usual selection of behavioral enrichment items. Luna watched her approach with the kind of stillness that preceded explosive motion, but Sarah had learned to read the subtle signs that distinguished hunting behavior from play. Instead, I spent 6 months earning your trust, learning your language, understanding your needs. It was the most dangerous and most rewarding research of my career. Luna accepted the food with delicate precision, her massive talons handling the offering with the care of a surgeon. As she ate, Sarah scattered the enrichment items around the enclosure, puzzle boxes that required problem-solving to open, scent markers from various worlds, and complex mechanical toys that could be taken apart and rebuilt. The really interesting discovery was that your species doesn't kill for pleasure or dominance. You hunt because it's necessary for your mental and physical health. HFY need the challenge of stalking intelligent prey. Without it, you develop the equivalent of psychological disorders. That's why the HFY Council custody became increasingly violent and unpredictable. They were being driven insane by captivity. Luna finished her meal and immediately approached one of the puzzle boxes. Her 4 eyes examined it from different angles while her manipulator appendages tested various opening mechanisms. The box was designed to require the kind of 3-dimensional thinking that challenged even advanced AI systems, yet Luna had it open within minutes. But when you're given proper enrichment, regular mental stimulation, and what we might call companionship, you display remarkable emotional intelligence. You've never once attempted to harm me, even though you could easily break through this containment and kill me before I could reach the emergency protocols. The creature looked up from her puzzle and fixed Sarah with what could only be described as an affectionate gaze. Coming from a being designed by evolution to be the ultimate predator, it was both heartwarming and terrifying. So here's the situation, Sarah said, settling into her observation chair. Your cousin has broken out of council prison and is probably sending signals to the rest of your species. The galaxy is about to face an invasion by creatures they consider unstoppable monsters. And I'm the only person who understands that HFY are intelligent social beings who might be willing to negotiate under the right circumstances. Luna's bioluminescent patterns spelled out a question. What will you do?" Sarah grinned and pulled up the communication console. "Well, first I'm going to send a message to the council offering my expertise in Vexhay behavior. They'll probably ignore it initially, but when things get bad enough, they'll be desperate for any help they can get." She began composing a formal message to the Galactic Council's Xenobiology Department, detailing her 3 years of research and offering her services as a consultant on Vexhay behavior. She included enough technical details to prove her expertise without revealing Luna's existence or location. "Then," Sarah continued, "I'm going to prepare for some very interesting visitors. If your cousin is smart, and we both know Vexhay are extremely smart, it won't take long to track down the source of some very interesting pheromone signatures I've been documenting." Luna's eyes widened with what Sarah had learned to recognize as excitement. The creature's bioluminescence shifted to patterns indicating curiosity and anticipation. "Oh, yes, girl. I've been collecting samples of your scent markers for 3 years. Every time you mark territory in your enclosure, every time you express emotion through chemical signals, I've been cataloging it all. Any Vexhay within a few light years would recognize the signatures as coming from one of their own." The implications were clear, and Luna's response confirmed Sarah's suspicions. The escaped Vexhay would eventually follow the scent trail to the Helix station. When that happened, Sarah would either make the greatest breakthrough in interspecies communication in galactic history, or she would become the first human to be killed by multiple Vexhay working in coordination. "The smart thing to do would be to evacuate immediately," Sarah admitted. "Pack up my research, destroy any evidence of your existence, and let the Council handle this situation with their usual combination of panic and poorly thought-out military responses." She stood and walked to the observation window that looked out at the dead world below. Somewhere out in the darkness between stars, the most feared predator in galactic history was free and probably hungry. Soon, it would be joined by others of its kind, and the galaxy would face a threat unlike anything in recorded history. "But I've never been accused of being smart," Sarah said with a grin. "And besides, someone needs to be here to make proper introductions when your family comes calling." Luna's response was a complex harmonization that roughly translated to approval mixed with anticipation. In the distance, barely visible against the cosmic background, Sarah thought she could see the faint trail of a ship's drive signature. It was probably nothing, just a trade vessel on a routine cargo run or maybe a council patrol ship responding to the emergency. But something in Luna's sudden stillness suggested otherwise. The creature had moved to the edge of her enclosure, her sensory appendages extended and twitching with what Sarah had learned to recognize as long-range detection behavior. "How far away?" Sarah asked quietly. Luna's bioluminescent display showed a pattern indicating distance measured in days rather than hours. Close enough to be certain, far enough away to prepare. Sarah took a deep breath and activated the station's external sensor array. If she was right about what was coming, the next few days would either establish humanity's place as the galaxy's premier experts on Vexhay psychology, or they would mark the end of her research career in the most definitive way possible. Either way, it was going to be fascinating. The Council's response to Sarah's offer came faster than she had anticipated, though not in the form she expected. Instead of a polite acknowledgement or even a dismissive rejection, her communication triggered what appeared to be a full investigative protocol. Within 6 hours of sending her message, the Helix station's proximity alarms detected 3 Council vessels dropping out of hyperspace and assuming standard interdiction positions around the station. Sarah watched the tactical display with growing amusement as the ships, 2 patrol corvettes and what appeared to be a science vessel, established a perimeter that effectively trapped her on the station. The lead ship was already broadcasting standard detention codes and demanding that she prepare for immediate boarding and inspection. "Well, Luna," Sarah said, watching the creature track the approaching vessels through the station's sensor network, "it seems my reputation precedes me." Luna's response was a series of rapid bioluminescent patterns that Sarah had learned indicated both curiosity and mild irritation. The creature was intelligent enough to understand that the arrival of council ships complicated their situation, but also appeared to find the humans' tactical approach somewhat primitive. 3 ships to investigate 1 research station does seem like overkill. But remember, from their perspective, I just claim to have expertise in dealing with the most dangerous predator in galactic history. They're probably wondering if I'm insane, lying, or somehow connected to the prison break.
The communication system crackled to life with an incoming transmission from the lead vessel.
Helix Research Station, this is Commander Zextan of the Council Enforcement Division. You are ordered to prepare for immediate boarding and inspection. Any attempt to resist or evacuate will be considered an admission of guilt in connection with the Vex-High containment breach. Sarah activated the response channel, making sure her voice carried the right combination of professional authority and slightly offended innocence. Commander Zextan, this is Dr. Sarah Chen, Director of the Helix Xenobiology Research Project. I'm not sure why you're treating my offer of scientific assistance as a criminal matter, but I'm happy to cooperate with any reasonable inspection. There was a long pause before Zextan responded. Dr. Chen, our records show that you requested this posting specifically and have operated alone for 3 years. Your research proposals were deliberately vague about the nature of your work, and now you claim expertise in dealing with a creature that no living being has successfully studied. You'll understand our skepticism. Of course, Sarah replied, though I should point out that your records probably also show that I'm one of the galaxy's leading experts in xenobiology, with particular specialization in predator behavior and interspecies communication. I didn't claim to have studied the Vex-Eye directly. I claim to have insights that might be useful in understanding their behavior patterns. Another pause, this one accompanied by what sounded like heated discussion in the background. Finally, Zextan's voice returned with a slightly different tone. Dr. Chen, we're receiving some very unusual sensor readings from your station. Can you explain why your facility appears to be generating electromagnetic signatures consistent with large-scale containment systems? Sarah glanced at Luna, who had moved to a position where she could observe the conversation while remaining hidden in the shadows of her enclosure. The creature's 4 eyes were fixed on the communication panel with the kind of attention that suggested she understood exactly what was happening. The Helix station is equipped with advanced xenobiological containment facilities, Sarah replied truthfully. It's a standard feature for any deep space research installation that might encounter unknown species. The electromagnetic signatures you're detecting are from the environmental control systems and specimen monitoring arrays. And what specimens are you currently monitoring? This was the critical moment. Sarah could lie, claim her containment systems were empty, and probably convince the council team to conduct a routine inspection before moving on. Or she could begin the delicate process of revealing Luna's existence in a way that might actually advance her research goals. I'm currently conducting behavioral studies on a single specimen of a previously unknown predator species, she said carefully. The creature was found injured and alone on the dead world below 3 years ago. It appeared to be a juvenile that had been separated from its pack. The silence that followed this admission lasted nearly 30 seconds. When Zextan's voice returned, it carried the kind of carefully controlled tension that suggested someone was struggling not to scream. Dr. Chen, are you telling me that you have been harboring an unknown alien predator on your station for 3 years without reporting it to the council? I'm telling you that I've been conducting legitimate xenobiological research in accordance with my authorized research parameters. The creature I discovered was clearly intelligent and potentially dangerous, but it was also injured and alone. Standard protocol in such situations is to provide emergency care while conducting initial assessment studies. For 3 years? It's a very complex species. Luna's soft laughter drifted across the laboratory, a sound that would have been terrifying to anyone unfamiliar with Vex-Hay behavioral patterns. To Sarah, it indicated that the creature found the entire conversation amusing. Dr. Chen, Zextan said, with the tone of someone reaching the end of their patience, "We're going to dock with your station in approximately 15 minutes. You will meet our boarding party at the main airlock and provide complete access to all areas of your facility. If you're hiding what I think you're hiding, you're going to find yourself facing some very serious charges." "Understood, Commander. I'll be waiting at the airlock." Sarah closed the communication channel and turned to face Luna's enclosure. The creature had emerged from the shadows enough to display complex bioluminescent patterns across her skin. The message was clear enough: curiosity about the approaching visitors mixed with what might have been anticipation. "This is going to be interesting," Sarah murmured. "They're expecting to find either proof that I'm insane or evidence that I'm somehow connected to the prison break. They're definitely not expecting to find a perfectly healthy, well-socialized Vexahai who's learned to communicate in council standard." Luna's response was a sequence of light patterns that roughly translated to "should be amusing." The question is whether I introduce you immediately or let them discover you naturally. Immediate introduction would be safer for everyone involved, but natural discovery might be more convincing from a scientific standpoint. The creature considered this for a moment, then displayed a pattern indicating preference for natural discovery. Sarah nodded, understanding the reasoning. If the council team found Luna on their own, it would be harder for them to dismiss her existence as some kind of elaborate deception. "All right, but when they do find you, please remember that these are not prey animals. They're potential allies who could help us establish communication with your cousin and possibly prevent a galaxy-wide war." Luna's acknowledgement was accompanied by what Sarah had learned to recognize as predatory amusement. The creature understood the stakes involved, but she also clearly looked forward to observing the human's reactions to her presence. Sarah spent the next 10 minutes preparing for the inspection. She activated the laboratory's standard recording systems to document the encounter, secured any sensitive research materials that might be misinterpreted, and made sure the station's life support systems were optimized for hosting multiple species. Most importantly, she reviewed her notes on Council First Contact protocols. If this encounter went well, it could establish humanity's position as the galaxy's leading experts on Vex's high behavior. If it went poorly, she might find herself facing charges of harboring a dangerous predator and conducting unauthorized xenobiological experiments. The docking clamps engaged with a solid thunk that echoed through the station's corridors. Sarah made her way to the main airlock, taking deep breaths to calm her nerves. In all her years of research, she had never been in a situation quite like this one. She was about to introduce the galaxy's most feared predator to representatives of the civilization that had spent millennia trying to keep such creatures contained. The airlock cycled open to reveal 3 figures in council enforcement uniforms. Commander Zextan was a tall, slender humanoid with the pale blue skin and cranial ridges of a Vorthan. He was flanked by what appeared to be a human security specialist and a bulky, heavily armored figure that Sarah recognized as a Krathan combat engineer. "Dr. Chen," Zextan said with a nod that managed to be both polite and suspicious. "Thank you for your cooperation. This is Security Specialist Morrison and Combat Engineer Takvar. We'd like to begin with a tour of your primary research facilities." "Of course," Sarah replied, leading them through the station's main corridor. Though I should mention that some areas of the laboratory are currently configured for behavioral observation studies. Any sudden movements or loud noises could disrupt ongoing research. Specialist Morrison, a compact woman with the kind of alertness that suggested extensive combat experience, glanced around the corridor with obvious suspicion. "What kind of behavioral studies require that level of environmental control?" "Predator psychology research," Sarah replied truthfully. "When you're studying creatures that have evolved to hunt intelligent prey, you need to be very careful about triggering defensive or aggressive responses." The laboratory doors slid open to reveal the main research area in all its carefully controlled glory. The council team stepped inside, their expressions shifting from suspicion to professional interest as they took in the impressive array of monitoring equipment and analysis stations. "Impressive facility," Zextan admitted, examining the computer displays that showed various biological readings and behavioral analysis charts. "Your funding request didn't mention this level of sophistication. Most of the advanced equipment was acquired through research grants and equipment sharing agreements with other facilities," Sarah explained. "When you're working alone on the galactic rim, you need to be very well prepared for any situation." Takvar, the Krathan engineer, was studying the containment area with obvious professional interest. His species was known for their expertise in security systems and containment protocols. This enclosure is built to very high standards, he rumbled in the deep, resonant voice typical of his people. Environmental controls, multiple backup systems, and, he paused, studying the readings on a nearby monitor. These power consumption levels suggest active camouflage suppression systems. What exactly are you keeping in there? Sarah felt her heart rate increase slightly, but kept her voice steady. I mentioned that I've been studying a previously unknown predator species. The creature has some unusual adaptive capabilities that require specialized containment protocols. Morrison had moved to one of the observation windows and was peering into the enclosure's carefully lit interior. I don't see anything, she said, adjusting the window's transparency settings. Are you sure there's something in there? Oh, she's there, Sarah said with a slight smile. Luna just prefers to remain hidden when strangers are around. It's a natural defensive behavior for her species. Zextan's expression sharpened at the mention of a name. You've named it? Her, Sarah corrected gently. And yes, I've named her. After 3 years of behavioral research, it becomes difficult to think of an intelligent being as simply it. Luna has demonstrated problem-solving abilities, emotional responses, and what appears to be a sophisticated communication system. The 3 council officers exchanged glances that clearly communicated their growing concern. Morrison stepped back from the observation window and activated her handheld scanner, running it over the enclosure's external sensors. I'm reading some very unusual biosignatures, she reported quietly. Large-scale life form definitely present, but the readings are inconsistent. It's like the creature is there and not there at the same time. Adaptive camouflage, Sarah explained. Luna's species has evolved sophisticated methods for avoiding detection. They can bend electromagnetic radiation, muffle sound waves, and even mask their scent signatures when they choose to. Takvar's expression had shifted from professional interest to genuine alarm. Dr. Chen, these capabilities you're describing are very similar to those reported for the Vexi. Are they? Sarah asked innocently. I wouldn't know. As I mentioned in my communication to the Council, I don't have access to classified information about Vex's high behavior patterns. I can only report on what I've observed in my own research subject. Before anyone could respond, the lights in the laboratory flickered slightly. It was a subtle effect that most people might have attributed to a power fluctuation or equipment malfunction, but Sarah recognized it as one of Luna's favorite methods for announcing her presence when she was feeling playful. Morrison's scanner began emitting a series of rapid beeps as its readings spiked across multiple spectrums. Commander, she said with carefully controlled urgency, I'm getting massive biosignature spikes. Whatever's in there just became much more active. Zextan moved to the main observation window and activated the enclosure's full illumination system. The artificial environment was revealed in perfect detail. The carefully designed landscape, the monitoring equipment, the environmental controls, but there was still no sign of any creature. Where exactly is this specimen? He demanded. Right there, Sarah said, pointing to what appeared to be an empty section of the enclosure near the artificial cave system. She's watching you. Morrison's scanner was now emitting a continuous warning tone. Sir, I'm reading massive electromagnetic distortions centered on the exact area Dr. Chen indicated. Something is definitely there. Luna, apparently deciding that the game had gone on long enough, chose that moment to reveal herself. The effect was gradual but stunning. She simply materialized from the shadows like a living nightmare given form. One moment the enclosure appeared empty, and the next moment an 18-foot-tall predator was standing in plain view, her 4 eyes fixed directly on the council officers. Morrison's scanner exploded in a shower of sparks as its circuits overloaded. Takvar stumbled backward with a curse in his native language that probably translated to something highly unflattering about the parentage of whatever cosmic force had led him to this moment. Zextan stood frozen, his pale blue skin shifting to an even paler shade that suggested all his blood had suddenly relocated to his core organs. Gentlemen, Sarah said calmly, I'd like you to meet Luna. Luna, these are visitors from the Galactic Council. The creature's response was a low, harmonious vocalization that somehow managed to sound both greeting and warning. Her bioluminescent patterns displayed a complex sequence that Sarah had learned meant curiosity mixed with cautious evaluation of potential threat levels. That, Takbar said in a voice that was only slightly steadier than his hands, is a Vexi. Is it? Sarah asked, maintaining her innocent tone despite the situation. As I mentioned, I don't have access to classified information about Vex's high characteristics. I can only tell you that Luna is a remarkably intelligent and surprisingly social creature who has been an excellent research subject. Zextan finally found his voice, though it carried a slight tremor that suggested his shock was far from over. Dr. Chen, you have been harboring what appears to be a juvenile Vex High on your research station for 3 years. Do you have any idea how dangerous this creature is? Dangerous? Sarah looked at Luna, who was now displaying bioluminescent patterns that indicated amusement. To whom? Luna has never attempted to harm me, has never shown aggressive behavior outside of controlled testing scenarios, and has actually demonstrated remarkable emotional intelligence and social awareness. Morrison was slowly reaching for her sidearm, her eyes never leaving Luna's massive form. Dr. Chen, please step away from the containment area. We need to implement emergency protocols immediately. What emergency? Sarah asked, genuinely puzzled. Luna is safely contained, completely socialized, and currently engaged in peaceful observation of new visitors. There's no emergency here unless you create one. Luna seemed to sense the increasing tension in the room. Her bioluminescent patterns shifted to what Sarah recognized as a calming display. Soft, rhythmic lights that had always helped soothe the creature when she was stressed or excited. Unfortunately, the council officers had no way of interpreting this behavior as anything other than preparation for attack. That thing is communicating, Zextan whispered. It's trying to coordinate with something. She's trying to communicate with you, Sarah corrected. Luna has developed a sophisticated visual language that allows for complex information exchange. What you're seeing is her attempt to establish peaceful contact. The situation was rapidly approaching a crisis point. Sarah could see that the council officers were preparing to implement what they probably considered standard safety protocols for dealing with a Vexi threat. Those protocols undoubtedly involved immediate containment, sedation, and quite possibly termination of the subject. Luna, meanwhile, was becoming increasingly agitated by the human's obvious fear and hostility. Her bioluminescent patterns were shifting to displays that Sarah recognized as stress indicators. If the creature felt genuinely threatened, her response could validate every fear the council harbored about Vex High aggression. Everyone please remain calm, Sarah said firmly. This situation is completely under control if we all make rational decisions based on observable facts rather than preconceived fears. She walked closer to the containment area, ignoring Morrison's sharp intake of breath. Luna moved to meet her at the transparent wall, her massive form now fully visible and undeniably magnificent. Up close, the creature's alien beauty was undeniable. Every line of her body spoke of perfect evolutionary adaptation for a purpose that transcended simple violence. Luna, Sarah said softly, our visitors are afraid because they don't understand your species. Can you show them that you're not a threat? The creature's response was immediate and elegant. She settled into a resting position that reduced her apparent size, retracted the more obviously weaponized aspects of her anatomy, and shifted her bioluminescent display to the soft, rhythmic patterns that Sarah had always associated with contentment and trust. You see? Sarah said to the council officers, Luna understands the concept of peaceful demonstration. She's deliberately making herself appear less threatening because she recognizes that you're frightened. Zextan stared at the display in obvious disbelief. Vexi don't demonstrate peaceful intent. They're apex predators with no concept of mercy or cooperation. According to whom? Sarah asked. Have you ever actually communicated with a Vexi? Has anyone in the council's employ ever attempted to establish meaningful contact with one of these creatures? The silence that followed her question was answer enough. The galaxy's understanding of Vexi behavior was based entirely on encounters with hostile specimens. creatures that had been captured, imprisoned, tortured, and driven to violence by their treatment. What you're looking at, Sarah continued, is proof that Vexizai are not mindless predators. They're intelligent beings capable of learning, adapting, and forming social bonds. Luna has spent 3 years demonstrating that, with proper care and understanding, even the galaxy's most feared predator can become a willing participant in peaceful scientific research. Luna chose that moment to approach the puzzle box that Sarah had left in her enclosure that morning. With delicate precision, she manipulated the complex mechanism until it opened to reveal the treat hidden inside. Then she looked directly at the council officers and displayed a bioluminescent pattern that needed no translation. Satisfaction with a task well completed. "Remarkable," Takvar whispered, his professional engineer's mind clearly struggling to process what he was seeing. "The cognitive requirements for solving that puzzle are considerable. This creature is demonstrating problem-solving abilities equivalent to most sentient species." "Equivalent?" Sarah laughed. "Luna regularly solves puzzles that challenge advanced AI systems. Her cognitive abilities are far beyond most sentient species. The question isn't whether Vexihai are intelligent, it's whether we're intelligent enough to communicate with them." The debate over Luna's intelligence and the implications of her peaceful behavior might have continued for hours, but the station's long-range sensors chose that moment to detect something that changed the entire dynamic of their situation. The proximity alarms began sounding again, this time with the deep, urgent tone that indicated an unidentified vessel approaching at high speed. "Commander," Morrison reported, checking her replacement scanner. "We have a single ship dropping out of hyperspace approximately 10,000 kilometers off our starboard bow. Configuration unknown, but it's big, at least twice the mass of a Council dreadnought." Zextan activated his personal communicator to contact his ships. "This is Commander Zextan to all Council vessels. Report status and begin immediate threat assessment of the new arrival." The response came back immediately, crackling with tension. "Commander, this is the CNS Vigilant. The approaching vessel doesn't match any known configuration in our databases. It appears to be constructed from some kind of organic material, and it's generating massive electromagnetic signatures across all spectrums. We're also detecting what might be communication signals, but they're unlike anything we've encountered before." Luna's reaction to this news was immediate and dramatic. She moved to the edge of her enclosure closest to the station's outer hull, her sensory appendages extending to their full length. Her bioluminescent patterns shifted to displays that Sarah had never seen before, complex, rapidly changing sequences that seemed to carry urgent information. "She's responding to those signals," Sarah realized. "Luna, can you understand what the approaching ship is trying to communicate?" The creature's response was a series of patterns that roughly translated to recognition, excitement, and underlying concern. The approaching vessel was definitely connected to her species, but there was something about the communication that was causing her distress. "Dr. Sip Chen," Zexton said with barely controlled urgency, "if that ship is what I think it is, we need to evacuate this area immediately. A full-grown Vexihai in an unrestricted environment is capable of destroying entire fleets. Or," Sarah said thoughtfully, "we could try to establish communication. If Luna can interpret their signals, we might be able to arrange a peaceful first contact instead of another violent confrontation." Morrison was already moving toward the exit. "With respect, Doctor, peaceful first contact with a Vexihai has never been achieved. The creature that escaped from Council custody has already destroyed 2 research stations and a patrol convoy. It's not interested in talking." Luna's agitation was increasing by the minute. Her bioluminescent displays were becoming more urgent, and she was emitting vocalizations that Sarah had learned indicated significant distress. Whatever message the approaching ship was transmitting, it was having a profound effect on her usually calm research subject. "Luna," Sarah said, moving closer to the containment area. "What is the ship trying to tell you?" The creature's response was a complex sequence that took Sarah several moments to interpret. When she finally understood the message, her expression shifted from curiosity to alarm. "Oh," she said quietly, "that's not good." "What?" Zextan demanded. "What did it say?" The approaching ship is broadcasting what Luna interprets as a distress call, but not a request for help, a warning. According to her translation, the message roughly means danger approaching, prepare to run, hunting pack closing fast. The implications of this revelation hung in the air for several seconds before Morrison voiced what they were all thinking. If that's the escaped Vex Hay from the prison and it's warning Luna about danger, then what the hell is it running from? Before anyone could answer, the station's communication array activated with an incoming transmission from the approaching vessel. The signal was unlike anything Sarah had ever heard. A complex harmonization of sounds that seemed to shift between frequencies in patterns that hurt to listen to. Luna's response was immediate. She began vocalizing in sync with the transmission, her own sounds blending with the alien communication in a way that transformed the painful cacophony into something that almost resembled music. She's translating, Sarah realized. Luna, can you help us understand what the ship is saying? The creature's bioluminescent patterns shifted to what Sarah recognized as affirmative acknowledgement, followed by a sequence of displays that she struggled to interpret. The message was complex, involving concepts that didn't translate well into human language. Something about family member in danger? No, that's not quite right. More like pack member trapped by... Sarah frowned as she worked through the translation. By something called Hunters of Hunters? Zextan's face had gone completely pale. Hunters of Hunters. Oh no. Oh, that's very bad. What's Hunters of Hunters? Morrison asked. It's a theoretical designation we use in Council intelligence for a creature that would be capable of hunting Vexay, Zextan explained. We always assumed it was just a hypothetical threat assessment. The idea that something could successfully hunt the galaxy's apex predator was considered biologically impossible. Luna's distress was becoming more pronounced. She was moving around her enclosure in patterns that Sarah recognized as territorial defense behavior, her normally graceful movements taking on the focused intensity that preceded combat readiness. The ship is asking for sanctuary, Sarah translated as Luna's displays continued. The creature aboard is injured and being pursued by something it describes as unstoppable, inevitable. The concept doesn't translate well, but it's clearly something the Vexay High consider extremely dangerous. Morrison was coordinating with the council ships through her communicator, her voice carrying the kind of controlled tension that suggested someone trying very hard not to panic. Commander, the Vigilant reports that they're detecting additional hyperspace signatures approaching from multiple vectors. At least 6 ships, configuration unknown, estimated arrival in less than 10 minutes. And those would be our Hunters of Hunters, Zextan said grimly. Chen, we need to evacuate this station immediately. Whatever's coming is apparently capable of hunting Vex High, which means it's far beyond our ability to handle. We can't just abandon Luna, Sarah protested. She's been cooperative and peaceful for 3 years. We have an obligation to protect her. Dr. Chen, that creature is a Vex High. It can protect itself better than anything we could do for it. Luna's vocalization suddenly became more urgent, and her bioluminescent patterns shifted to what Sarah had learned were emergency communication displays. The creature was trying to convey something critical, and her growing agitation suggested it was information they needed immediately. Luna, slow down, Sarah said, moving as close to the containment area as safety protocols allowed. I can't translate that quickly. What are you trying to tell us? The creature's response was a simplified sequence that Sarah could interpret. The approaching hunters were not hunting the Vex High for food, territory, or any other natural reason. They were hunting them for sport, and they had been pursuing this particular Vex High for several galactic cycles. Sport hunting, Sarah repeated with growing horror. There's something out there that hunts Vex High for entertainment. Morrison's communicator crackled with an urgent transmission from the council ships. Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the approaching Vexay vessel. It's asking for protection. A Vexay is asking the council for protection. Patch it through to the station, Zextan ordered. If we're going to die here, I want to understand what we're facing. The transmission that filled the laboratory was nothing like the earlier communication, where Luna's exchanges with the approaching ship had carried undertones of family recognition and shared concern. This new signal was pure desperation. Even without translation, the emotional content was clear. This was a creature in pain, asking for help from beings it had every reason to consider enemies. Luna's response was immediate and emotionally charged. She began what could only be described as singing, her vocalizations carrying harmonies that seemed to provide comfort and reassurance to the desperate creature aboard the approaching ship. She's trying to calm her cousin, Sarah realized. Luna is providing emotional support to an injured Vexi that's being hunted by something even more dangerous than itself. The implications were staggering. For millennia, the galaxy had lived in fear of the Vexi as the ultimate predator. Now they were faced with the reality that something existed that made the Vexi prey animals. Dr. Chen, Takvar said quietly, your research subject is demonstrating empathy toward another member of her species. This level of emotional intelligence suggests that Vexi have a complex social structure that we never suspected. Not just complex, Sarah said, watching Luna's careful ministrations to the distressed signals from space. Sophisticated, compassionate. Everything we thought we knew about Vexi behavior was based on observing creatures that had been traumatized by captivity and torture. Morrison was monitoring the tactical display as the unknown hunters approached. Commander, the pursuing ships have dropped out of hyperspace. Configuration is... I don't know what the hell that configuration is. They look like someone decided to build spaceships out of nightmares. The long-range sensors finally managed to get clear readings on the approaching hunters, and the images that appeared on the main display defied easy description. The ships were clearly artificial constructs, but they seemed to follow design principles that prioritized psychological impact over engineering efficiency. Every surface was covered in what appeared to be decorative elements made from organic materials, and the overall effect was of vessels that had been designed specifically to inspire terror. Those aren't exploration ships or military vessels, Sexton observed. They're designed to intimidate. Whatever species built those ships, they want their targets to know they're being hunted. Luna had moved to the section of her enclosure that provided the best view of the external sensors. Her bioluminescent patterns were now cycling through what Sarah recognized as tactical assessment displays. The creature was analyzing the approaching threats and planning defensive strategies.
Luna, Sarah said, can you tell us what these hunters are?
What species build ships like that? The creature's response was a series of patterns that conveyed concepts Sarah had difficulty interpreting. The closest translation she could manage was something like empty ones who steal strength, combined with those who take what makes others alive. I think she's describing some kind of parasitic species, Sarah said slowly. Something that steals biological capabilities from other creatures. Morrison was coordinating with the council ships as they attempted to establish defensive positions around the station. Doctor, if these parasites have been hunting Vexi long enough to steal their capabilities, then we're facing enemies with all the advantages of the galaxy's most dangerous predator plus whatever technological advantages their own species provides. The approaching Vexi ship was now close enough for detailed scans, and what the sensors revealed was heartbreaking. The organic vessel showed clear signs of extensive damage. Sections that had been torn away, areas where the living ship's surface showed signs of infection or parasitic attachment, and what appeared to be systematic scarring that suggested deliberate torture. They've been torturing it, Sarah said with growing anger. These hunters aren't just killing Vexi for sport, they're torturing them first. Luna's emotional state was deteriorating rapidly as she observed the condition of her approaching cousin. Her vocalizations were becoming increasingly distressed, and her movements around the enclosure were taking on the aggressive patterns that Sarah had only seen during controlled behavioral testing. Dr. Chen, Sexton said urgently, your research subject is becoming agitated. If she loses control, she could break containment. She won't, Sarah said with more confidence than she felt. Luna has never shown aggressive behavior toward non-threatening individuals. She's upset because she wants to help her cousin, not because she wants to hurt us. The station's proximity alarms reached a new level of urgency as the Vexay ship entered the immediate area around the Helix station. The organic vessel was massive, easily 3 times the size of the Council ships, but it moved with the fluid grace that suggested it was as much living creature as transportation device. "It's requesting permission to dock," Morrison reported. "A Vexihai is actually asking permission to come aboard a human research station." Sarah looked at Luna, who was displaying patterns that clearly indicated urgent request. The creature wanted her cousin brought aboard regardless of the risks involved. "Grant permission," Sarah said. "If we're going to make first contact with an adult Vexhei, we might as well do it properly." "Doctor," Chen, Zextan protested. "Allowing a full-grown Vexai onto this station could result in the deaths of everyone aboard. So could refusing to help it when those hunters arrive," Sarah pointed out. "At least if we provide sanctuary, we might have an ally instead of another enemy." Morrison was monitoring the approaching hunter ships. "Decision time, people. The hunters will be in weapons range in approximately 4 minutes. If we're going to run, we need to leave now. If we're going to fight, we need to coordinate our defensive strategy immediately." Sarah looked at Luna, who had positioned herself at the front of her enclosure and was displaying the complex bioluminescent patterns that the creature used for formal communication. The message was clear enough. The Vexay was asking for trust, promising protection in return for sanctuary. "We stay," Sarah decided. "Open the docking bay and prepare to receive our first official Vexhai diplomatic contact." As the massive organic ship maneuvered toward the station's largest docking facility, Sarah couldn't help but reflect on the irony of the situation. She had spent 3 years proving that Vexhai could be peaceful, cooperative research subjects. Now she was about to test whether that peaceful cooperation could extend to active alliance in the face of a common threat. "Luna," she said to her research subject, "I hope you know what you're doing. Because if this goes wrong, it's going to go very wrong indeed." The creature's response was a pattern that Sarah had learned to interpret as absolute confidence mixed with fierce protective instinct. Luna was certain that her cousin would honor the sanctuary being offered and equally certain that both Vexhai would fight to the death to protect their human allies. As the docking clamps engaged and the station shuddered under the mass of the organic vessel, Sarah realized that her quiet research career had just ended forever. One way or another, the next few hours would either establish humanity as the galaxy's premier experts on Vexhai relations, or they would mark the end of the Helix station and everyone aboard it. The airlock chimed, indicating successful docking connection. Somewhere beyond that barrier waited the most dangerous predator in galactic history, injured and desperate for sanctuary. In a few minutes, Sarah would come face to face with a creature that had inspired terror across the galaxy for millennia. She found herself looking forward to the meeting. The docking bay's atmospheric processors worked overtime to establish environmental compatibility between the station and the organic Vexay vessel. Sarah stood at the observation deck overlooking the bay, watching as the living ship's surface rippled and pulsed with what appeared to be deliberate communication patterns. Luna had been moved to a portable containment unit that allowed her to accompany the group while maintaining safety protocols, though Sarah suspected those protocols were more for the comfort of the council officers than actual necessity. "Atmospheric composition is stabilizing," Morrison reported from her scanner. "The ship is actively adjusting its internal environment to match ours. That level of biological adaptability is unprecedented." Takvar was studying the structural readings from his engineering sensors. The vessel's construction defies conventional understanding of materials science. It appears to be grown rather than built with integrated biological systems that serve the same functions as mechanical components. "It's actually beautiful in a completely alien way." Commander Zextan seemed less impressed with the aesthetic qualities of their visitor's ship. "Contact with the hunter vessels in 90 seconds, he announced. "Whatever diplomatic breakthrough we're about to attempt, it needs to happen very quickly." Luna's portable containment unit was positioned near the airlock, and the creature was displaying rapid sequences of bioluminescent patterns that Sarah was struggling to interpret. The communication was clearly urgent, but the complexity suggested Luna was trying to convey detailed information about Vex-High social protocols. She's trying to prepare us for formal contact, Sarah realized. Luna is explaining how to approach an adult Vex-High without triggering defensive responses. And what does she suggest? Zextan asked with the tone of someone who already regretted asking. Interesting recommendations, Sarah said, working through the translation. We should approach slowly, avoid direct eye contact until invited, and this is fascinating. Offer food as a sign of peaceful intent. Morrison looked skeptical. We're supposed to feed a creature that could eat us? It's a social ritual, Sarah explained. Among Vexi, sharing food establishes trust and indicates non-aggressive intentions. The act of accepting food makes the recipient temporarily vulnerable, so it's a powerful gesture of good faith. The airlock chimed to indicate pressure equalization was complete. Beyond the heavy barrier, something massive was moving around in the docking bay. The sounds that filtered through the hull were unlike anything Sarah had ever heard, a combination of deliberate movement and what might have been singing. Your call, Dr. Chen, Zextan said grimly. Do we open the airlock and meet the galaxy's most dangerous predator face to face, or do we evacuate and hope the hunters are more interested in their original quarry than in us? Sarah looked at Luna, who was displaying patterns of encouragement mixed with protective assurance. The creature's confidence was infectious, and Sarah found herself feeling less afraid than excited about the historic encounter they were about to experience. We open the airlock, she decided, but slowly and with Luna leading the way. If anyone can convince an injured Vexahai to trust us, it's another member of their species. The heavy door slid open with deliberate slowness, revealing the docking bay's interior in sections. First came the sight of organic ship components that pulsed with their own light, then the complex atmospheric processing equipment that was maintaining environmental balance, and finally the massive figure that dominated the center of the bay. The adult Bex AI was everything the emergency broadcasts had described and more. Nearly 25 feet tall at full extension, its body was a masterwork of predatory evolution that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Unlike Luna's youthful grace, this creature carried itself with the deadly confidence of absolute apex predator. Every movement suggested lethal capability held in careful restraint. But it was the injuries that captured Sarah's immediate attention. The creature's left side showed evidence of systematic damage that could only have been inflicted deliberately. Sections of its natural armor plating had been removed with surgical precision, leaving exposed areas that wept with a fluid that might have been blood. More disturbing were the obvious signs of technological parasitism, metallic growths that seemed to have been grafted onto the creature's sensory appendages. "Dear gods," Morrison whispered, "what did they do to it?" The Vexahai noticed their presence immediately, its four eyes focusing on the group with the kind of attention that evaluated threat levels and escape routes in milliseconds. But when those eyes found Luna's containment unit, the creature's entire demeanor shifted. The predatory alertness softened into something that could only be described as relief mixed with joy. Luna's response was immediate and emotionally powerful. She began vocalizing in harmonics that filled the docking bay with sounds that transformed the space from an industrial facility into something resembling a cathedral. The adult Vex-High joined her song, and the two creatures created music that spoke of reunion, family, and survival against impossible odds. They know each other, Sarah realized. This isn't just any Vexi, this is someone Luna recognizes. The adult creature approached the group slowly, its movements careful and deliberate despite the obvious pain from its injuries. When it reached a distance of about 10 feet, it settled into a resting position that reduced its apparent size and retracted the more obviously weaponized aspects of its anatomy. "It's demonstrating peaceful intent," Takvar observed with professional admiration. The same behavioral pattern your research subject displayed earlier. Luna began displaying rapid bioluminescent sequences that seemed to be providing information to her larger cousin. Sarah could catch fragments of the communication, references to safe humans, good food, and interesting puzzles, but the speed and complexity made full translation difficult. The adult Vexahai listened intently, then shifted its attention back to the human group. Its four eyes studied each individual with obvious intelligence before focusing on Sarah with unmistakable recognition. "It knows I'm Luna's primary caretaker," Sarah said quietly. "Luna has been telling it about our research arrangement." What happened next surprised everyone. The massive creature began displaying its own bioluminescent patterns clearly directed at Sarah. The communication was slow and deliberately simple, as if the Vexahai was adjusting its language for someone still learning to interpret the visual signals. "Gratitude?" Sarah translated with growing amazement. "It's thanking me for taking care of Luna." Before anyone could respond, the station's warning systems activated with urgent proximity alerts. Morrison checked her scanner and reported with grim efficiency. Hunter ships entering weapons range. 6 vessels, all opening what appear to be firing ports. "We have maybe 30 seconds before they start shooting." The adult Vexhai's reaction to this news was immediate and dramatic. Its bioluminescent pattern shifted to displays that needed no translation. Battle readiness combined with protective determination. The creature rose to its full height, revealing the true magnificence of a Vexhai prepared for combat. "It's going to fight," Zextan observed. "A wounded Vexai is going to engage 6 hunter ships to protect this station." "Not alone," Sarah said, making a decision that would have seemed insane just hours earlier. "Luna, ask your cousin if it would accept assistance from council ships in the coming battle." Luna's translation of this offer triggered what could only be described as surprise from the adult Vexai. The creature's patterns displayed concepts that roughly translated to amazement that prey species would offer to fight alongside predators against a common enemy. The concept doesn't exist in their cultural framework, Sarah realized. Vexai have never had allies. They've always fought alone. Morrison was coordinating with the council ships through her communicator. "Commander, the Vigilant and escort vessels are requesting permission to engage the hunters. Captain Vex Theron wants to know if we're really planning to fight alongside a Vexhai." "Tell the captain," Zextan said with the tone of someone accepting inevitable insanity, "that we're about to make galactic history. All ships are authorized to coordinate defensive actions with our new ally." The adult Vexahai seemed to understand that some kind of alliance was being proposed. Its response was a complex sequence of patterns that Luna helped translate. The message was essentially an acceptance of cooperative defense combined with detailed tactical information about the hunter's capabilities and preferred attack methods. "Valuable intelligence," Takvar noted, recording the Vexhai's display patterns. If this creature has been fighting these hunters for extended periods, its tactical knowledge could be the difference between survival and destruction. Sarah was watching Luna's interaction with her cousin with growing fascination. The two creatures were engaged in rapid information exchange, sharing what appeared to be detailed assessments of the current situation and possible response strategies. The level of coordination suggested that Vexai possessed sophisticated military planning capabilities that had never been suspected. "They're developing a battle plan," she announced. "Luna is providing information about the station's capabilities and defensive systems while her cousin is sharing intelligence about hunter weaknesses. The first hunter ships appeared on the external cameras and the images confirmed everyone's worst fears. The vessels were clearly designed for intimidation as much as functionality, with surfaces that seemed to writhe and pulse with organic motion. Worse, the ships showed clear signs of biological enhancement, sections that had obviously been grafted on from other species' technology. "They're using stolen Vexahai biotechnology," Morrison observed with disgust. "Those hunters have been harvesting body parts to improve their own ships." The adult Vex's response to the sight of its own biological material being used by the hunters was a sound that defied description. It wasn't quite a roar, wasn't quite a song, but it carried undertones of rage and determination that made the station's hull vibrate with harmonic resonance. "Now it's personal," Sarah said, understanding the creature's emotional state without need for translation. "They didn't just hunt this Vexai. They desecrated it." Luna's patterns were becoming increasingly urgent as she attempted to coordinate between her cousin and the human defenders. The information she was providing was detailed enough to suggest that Vexay possessed comprehensive knowledge of hunter tactics and technology. Luna says the hunters prefer to engage their prey individually. Sarah translated, they use psychological warfare, fear, isolation, and despair to weaken their targets before moving in for the kill. But they're not equipped to handle coordinated resistance from multiple species working together. Morrison was monitoring the tactical display as the Council ships maneuvered into defensive positions around the station. The Vigilant is reporting that the hunters appear to be hesitating. They're holding position just outside weapons range instead of attacking immediately. They're confused, Sarah realized. The hunters expected to find a wounded Vexay alone and desperate. Instead, they're seeing an organized defense with multiple ship types and species coordination. This situation is outside their experience. The adult Vexay began moving toward the docking bay's exit, clearly intending to return to its ship and join the battle. But before leaving, it approached Luna's containment unit and engaged in what could only be described as a formal farewell ceremony. Family bonds, Sarah observed, watching the interaction with professional fascination. Vexay's social structures are more complex than we ever imagined. This isn't just gratitude or alliance, it's genuine affection between family members. Luna's response included bioluminescent patterns directed at Sarah and the council officers. The message was complex, but the general meaning was clear. Luna was asking her cousin to protect the humans who had shown kindness to her. She's vouching for us, Sarah said with wonder. Luna is formally introducing us to her family as allies worthy of protection. The adult Vexay's acknowledgement of this introduction was a moment that would be remembered in xenobiological journals for centuries to come. The galaxy's most feared predator formally recognized a group of humans and council officers as allies, family friends worthy of its protection in battle. Dr. Chen, Zextan said quietly, you have just achieved something that every diplomat in galactic history has considered impossible. You've established a formal alliance with the Vexay. Not me, Sarah corrected, watching as the massive creature prepared to return to its ship. Luna did this. She's been teaching us all along, teaching us that Vexay are not monsters to be feared, but intelligent beings capable of friendship, loyalty, and alliance. The adult Vexay paused at the docking bay exit and turned back to display one final message. The bioluminescent pattern was simple but profound, a formal promise of protection extended to those who had shown mercy to family. As the creature disappeared into its organic ship, Sarah felt the weight of the historical moment settling on her shoulders. Humanity had just formed its first alliance with the galaxy's apex predator, and they were about to test that alliance in combat against enemies that specialized in hunting the unhuntable. All hands, prepare for combat, Morrison announced over the station's communication system. We're about to find out if friendship with a Vexay is more powerful than whatever advantages our enemies have stolen. Through the observation windows, Sarah could see the hunter ships finally beginning their approach. But she also saw the council vessels moving into coordinated defensive positions, and the organic Vexay ship beginning to pulse with patterns that suggested it was preparing weapons systems that the galaxy had never seen before. Luna's bioluminescent display from her containment unit was clear enough. Confidence in victory, pride in alliance, and fierce determination to protect the family she had gained among the stars. The battle for the future of human-Vexay relations was about to begin. The battle began not with the explosive violence of conventional space combat, but with something far more unsettling: psychological warfare. The hunter ships approached in a pattern designed to maximize intimidation. Their organic surface decorations writhing and pulsing in synchronized displays meant to trigger primal fear responses in their prey. But for the first time in their hunting careers, the effect was completely neutralized. Fascinating, Sarah observed from the station's command center, watching the hunters' opening gambit with scientific interest rather than terror. They're trying to trigger panic responses, but they don't understand that we're not fighting as prey animals. We're fighting as pack hunters. Luna had been moved to the command center so she could maintain communication with her cousin's ship during the battle. Her bioluminescent displays provided a constant stream of tactical information, translating the adult Vexahi's strategic assessments and coordinating the unprecedented multi-species defense. Luna says her cousin is amused by the hunter's confusion, Sarah reported. Apparently, they've never encountered coordinated resistance before. Their entire tactical doctrine is based on isolating and terrorizing individual prey. Morrison was coordinating with the council ships while monitoring the hunters' approach patterns. The Vigilant reports that the enemy vessels are hesitating at optimal firing range. Captain Vexstar thinks they're waiting for us to break formation and attempt to flee. They're about to be very disappointed, Zextan said grimly. All council ships maintain defensive positions and wait for our ally to initiate combat. Let the Vex-High demonstrate proper hunting technique. The organic Vex-High ship had positioned itself at the forward point of their defensive formation, its living hull pulsing with patterns that seemed to grow more complex by the minute. Sarah realized she was witnessing something unprecedented. A Vex-High preparing for pack hunting behavior with non-Vex-High allies. This is completely outside their documented behavioral patterns, she noted, making rapid observations on her datapad. Everything we thought we knew about Vex's high social structure was based on observing isolated individuals, but Luna and her cousin are demonstrating pack coordination abilities that suggest their species naturally fights in coordinated groups. Luna's response to this observation was a sequence of patterns that roughly translated to, obviously, how else would you hunt something dangerous? The simplicity of her answer highlighted just how much the galaxy had misunderstood about Vex's nature. The first hunter ship made its move, accelerating toward the Vex-High vessel while broadcasting some kind of sonic weapon that was designed to disorient and confuse its target. The effect on the station's crew was immediate, a wave of vertigo and disorientation that made thinking clearly almost impossible. But the Vex-High ship's response was swift and elegant. Instead of trying to resist the sonic attack, it absorbed the frequencies and reflected them back in harmonic patterns that not only neutralized the weapon, but turned it into something resembling music. The hunter ship suddenly found itself being subjected to its own psychological warfare, amplified and refined by a superior predator.
Incredible, Takvar breathed, monitoring the energy readings.
The Vex-High ship is using biological resonance chambers to turn the hunter's own weapons against them. That level of adaptive response is beyond anything in our technological repertoire. The hunter ship's confusion was visible even from a distance. Its organic surface decorations began writhing in patterns that suggested panic rather than intimidation, and its approach vector became erratic as the crew apparently struggled with their own reflected psychological attack. Luna's cousin chose that moment to demonstrate why Vex's hay were considered the galaxy's apex predator. The organic ship flowed through space with impossible grace, its form shifting and adapting as it closed the distance to its target. What had appeared to be a large but conventional vessel suddenly revealed itself to be something far more sophisticated, a living weapon perfectly adapted for space combat. The engagement was over in seconds. The Vex-A ship enveloped the hunter vessel like a predator swallowing prey, its hull flowing around the enemy ship before contracting with irresistible force. When the organic vessel released its grip, the hunter ship drifted lifeless, its hull cracked and its crew apparently unconscious or dead. One down, Morrison report. The galaxy's deadliest predator was released. The human only chuckled and called her own. A short sci-fi story.